Good morning.
Surprise! It's Mrs. Klein.
And I cannot wait to get started, Mrs. Klein.
Right on.
We are going to be talking about problems with foreign powers today. If you want to follow along in your book, please open to page 326. This chapter is page 326 through 329. Now, in our last section, you guys learned about oh, and it's 10.3. Thank you. I'm going to fix that. Thank you.
Okay.
In our last section, we learned about the Louisiana Purchase and the explorations of this area. In this section, we're going to be learning about how Jefferson handled foreign affairs during his presidency.
Okay, as always, you guys, there's a big idea and essential question that we want for you to be considering. Big idea for this particular chapter or unit is conflict brings about change. An essential question for you to consider also is why do countries want to expand to add territory? There are vocabulary terms. Of course, we're going to have a podcast quiz. The terms for this lesson are impressment, the Embargo Act of 1807, Tecumseh, and also war hawks. So just be prepared and ready to go when we take that podcast quiz in a couple of days.
Okay, so we're going to get started. First thing we're going to talk about is Jefferson's foreign policy. When Jefferson took office, he hoped to keep the United States from getting involved with other countries. He was not successful for many reasons. One reason was that American merchants were already trading with countries all over the world. Another reason was that the Louisiana Purchase opened the country to westward expansion. This also brought Americans into contact with people from other nations. Finally, the United States had little control over the actions of other countries.
All right, the next section in this lesson is problems with France and England. All right, be considering this question. How did Britain interfere with American trade? Okay, for years after the French Revolution, Europe was at war. For a while, the United States managed to stay out of these conflicts. At first, the country even benefited from the wars. France had sold Louisiana to the United States, partly as a result of the war, because remember, Napoleon needed the money. And U.S. merchants took over much of Europe's trade.
By 1805, however, the British began to clamp down on U.S. shipping. They did not want Americans to provide their enemies with food and supplies. The actions of the British angered France, which made its own laws to control foreign shipping.
All right, and there America is in the middle of it all. All right, these changes put American merchants in a tough position. If they obeyed the French rules, their ships would be taken by the British. If they obeyed the British rules, their ships would be taken by the French.
Britain also interfered with U.S. shipping by impressment. That's one of our
vocabulary words.
Okay. The kidnapping of American sailors to work on British ships. One of the worst incidents of impressment occurred in 1807 off the coast of Virginia. The British ship Leopard attacked the American ship Chesapeake. The British killed 3 U.S. sailors in the battle. The attack angered Americans, many of whom wanted war.
Yeah, that would probably make a lot of people upset, especially with both. Now we're having problems with both England and France all over again. All right, the next section in this lesson is trade as a weapon. You can find this information on pages 327 and 328 in your book. And be thinking of this. What did Jefferson decide to do about the attack on the Chesapeake? Okay, Jefferson did not declare war against Britain. Instead, he asked Congress to pass trade laws to punish Britain and France. Congress passed the Embargo Act of 1807 to stop all foreign trade. The act prohibited or forbade U.S. ships from sailing to foreign ports. It also closed American ports to British ships.
Jefferson's policy was a disaster. It was more harmful to Americans, especially farmers and merchants, than to the British and French. Many shippers violated the embargo by making false claims about where they were going. Congress repealed the embargo in 1809. Madison became the next president in 1809. He reopened trade with all countries except France and Britain. Trade with these countries would begin again when they agreed to respect U.S. ships. Madison's policy was not effective either.
Yikes, so that's 2 strikes already.
Yeah.
All right, last section in this lesson, you guys, is Tecumseh and Native American unity, and also some information about the war hawks. Okay, so why were Americans angry with the British? So Americans were angry with the British for their interference with American shipping and the impressment of U.S. citizens. British actions in the Northwest also angered Americans. Many thought that the British were stirring up Native American resistance to American settlements.
After the British, I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses and it's killing me. Okay, after the Battle of Fallen Timbers, thousands of white settlers had moved into Ohio and Indiana. Tecumseh, a Shawnee chief, wanted to stop the loss of Native American land. He believed that Native American tribes would have to work together if they wanted to stop the loss of land. Events in 1809 proved him right.
That September, the governor of the Indiana Territory signed the Treaty of Fort Wayne. Chiefs of the Miami, Delaware, and Potawatomi tribes agreed to sell over 3 million acres of land to the United States. Tecumseh said the treaty was worthless. He said that if the land belonged to all tribes and that it could not be sold without the consent of all tribes.
After the Treaty of Fort Wayne, many Native Americans began to follow Tecumseh's advice. But the progress did not last. In November 1811, while Tecumseh was away recruiting tribes for his alliance, U.S. forces defeated the Shawnee at the Battle of Tippecanoe. It was a major setback for Tecumseh.
After the battle, Tecumseh and his followers fled to Canada. They received a warm welcome from the British. Americans, already upset by British interference at sea, became even angrier, and many Westerners demanded war. Urged on by the War Hawks, as these Westerners were called, Congress declared war on Britain on June 18th, 1812. All right, that's the end of this podcast. You guys, want to remind you that we've got vocabulary terms that you're responsible for. Their impressment, Embargo Act of 1807, Tecumseh, and War Hawks.
And I am logging off.
See you soon, guys.